What's the most shocking confession you've heard someone casually say? Story 1. I am a wheelchair user and was stopped by a homeless woman in Vegas who was very distraught about me crossing the street. She claimed she'd seen another wheelchair user get run over and killed on that particular road, and that I should always travel with someone able for visibility purposes. She got hysterical at that point, and I excused myself, promising to be careful. I was unsettled. I Googled the incident later. Her mugshot came up in the search. She was the driver. Reply 1. Damn! As a fellow wheelchair user, this is something I have some fear of. Even when I'm standing, I'm so short, plenty of trucks are way taller than me. I'm grateful that I'm with my 5'11" boyfriend most of the time, so they can generally see him if they can't see my 5'10" self. Story 2. I used to sell cable. You would not believe some of the crap 70-plus-year-old people will effing confess to you. I asked an older woman once what streaming services she used because I was trying to recommend her an internet speed. She takes a deep sighing breath and casually goes, "My father used to sneak into mine and my sister's room at night. Mother told us to be proper girls and not air our dirty laundry to the neighborhood." I was just staring, and all I could think to say was, "So, Netflix? Hulu?" Reply 1. Part of that is probably some sort of dementia and things on her mind she always wanted out, coming out. Poor woman. Reply 2. That and just being desperate for human contact. Had a dude come in and hang out in the store for 4 hours each day, 3 days straight. Screaming, threatening, freaking the F out over his bill. Day 3, he admits he just felt lonely because his wife was visiting his sister. So he came down there and made my day worse, evidently. I was flabbergasted. Reply 3. I was in line at a kiosk in a large grocery store last year, and the older woman at the till kept making small talk with the cashier, which was okay. I wasn't in a hurry. But at one point she didn't know what to say, but rather than leave, she just stood there, not wanting to break the human contact. The cashier did clock it, and another cashier took the customers at another till so she could keep talking with the cashier, but that was sad. She knew that once she exited the store, it was back to being lonely. Also, she smelled like pee a lot. Reply 4. I want to add to this as someone who worked in tech support for the elderly for multiple years. There's so many old people that have some form of mental degradation and no one knows. A lot of these people are old and stubborn, keep saying nothing is wrong, and then slowly their memory or their mental health declines. Their kids never visit and no one ever talks with them, so they are isolated. If you have a conversation with them, it's pretty noticeable. Reply 5. This is sad enough in and of itself, but then you think of all these people out driving, and it becomes downright dangerous. Story 3. Not a direct confession, but a coworker told me about a lawsuit he was involved in that sounded interesting, so I Googled it to see if I could find the court case. Instead, I found an article where he had gotten caught and arrested for filming minors. Reply 1. My wife told me this story after an evening out with her friend. They were drinking at a bar when a guy started to chat them up. Her friend was single and she kind of liked the guy, so they stayed. After a while, he got to the "my exes are all crazy" bit, and nonchalantly informed them that he had a court date coming because he was accused of sexually assaulting his own daughter. He never said he did or didn't do it, just that my bitch ex-wife reported it. Reply 2. Had a coworker like that? Everyone in the shop wanted him to get fired. Multiple complaints launched to the bosses and HR. He was never at fault or the bad guy for any of his actions, including, according to him, the rape of a 13-year-old. But as soon as the higher-ups would talk to him, he'd play the fool and sing a sad song about how he's just socially inept because he was in prison and he's working on being a better person. Story 4. A really good friend of mine had been out of contact traveling the country, hitchhiking, sleeping on random people's couches, camping out in the desert, etc. for around a year. And so when he came back, we all got together to hang out, and it basically turned into a small party. At some point, he just casually drops that he has a court date coming up and explains it was because his ex is suing him over the fact that he beat his infant daughter nearly to death sometime before he left. He then just tried to continue on with the party like nothing happened. I don't think I ever heard of anyone who was there hanging out with him again after that. Reply 1. I knew a high-level detective once, and it stuck with me that he once said he felt most people were dying. To tell you what happened / what they did. Like, it can serve them no good at all, but they just want it out like it feels like less of a burden or something. They want to drop it like a crap they just have to have and are sure they will feel better. Wild turn of phrase is maybe why I remember it. Reply 2. Had a client with a pretty simple case of shoplifting. Showed up, told him to remain silent, and told the police he'd remain silent so the interview ended. He was being processed for bail, etc., and outside of caution. And then he immediately started running his mouth off about what he did to the police. Fortunately, he was not under caution anymore, so whatever he said wasn't admissible. Yep. Reply 3. Blurt out. Confessions made without any questioning or prompting by the police are admissible in many jurisdictions. Perhaps not in the United States. There's an argument that it's ridiculous if they are not. Story 5. The sweetest friend of mine when I was probably around 15 years old casually mentioned how difficult it was to get her dad's cum out of her hair. I asked more about it and found that it was a reoccurring thing and that her mom knew. I went straight to my parents with it and they contacted the right people. Reply 1. Dang, I had a friend reveal a similar thing to me in middle school. She very nonchalantly told me all the males in her house were abusing her. I was horrified and told my parents, and they told the right folks. My mom ran into her a few years ago and she was doing well and in law school. Reply 2. When I was a young manager, I had a young gal start working on the team underneath me. She picked up a night shift gap I had, but said she would need a ride home because the buses didn't run that late. I agreed, because it meant I wouldn't have to stay up until 3 a.m. when I had to be up and working at 5 a.m. and she wasn't even asking for any cash, just a ride. Done. On the way back to her place, she started trauma dumping. Out of nowhere, like we were talking about other shifts she could pick up because she was looking to make more money if I didn't have limits on overtime. The trauma dumping? It was the 1-year anniversary of her brother killing himself. She had walked in and found him. She had exhausted the patience of the people who were letting her stay at the rental for free out of sympathy, and had run out of money that her brother had left her. He killed himself because he couldn't take it anymore. She said he apologized a lot in the note he wrote her, but she understood. Their dad had abused them both since they were little, doing stuff to them, forcing them to do stuff to each other, forcing them to do stuff to him, or their mom. Her older brother knew it was wrong and eventually contacted the police through a school counselor, though it took work to get people to believe him. The parents were visited by the cops and protection services, and got caught and convicted on making, selling, / distributing CP and a host of other crimes. The kids went into the foster care system, no other real family to speak of, but after he turned 18, her older brother found her and tried to help them start a life in a different city where no one knew them. She was doing school, he was working a couple of jobs to keep a roof over their heads, but he never got past wanting to die despite feeling compelled to want to protect and take care of his sister. I held her hand. I cried. She sat there just wanting to be heard. I still had to go open and do orders and inventory, but didn't want to just leave it at that. I walked her to her door. She clearly wasn't ready to be alone and asked me in. The place wasn't much to look at from the outside. It was worse inside, unfurnished with a child's mattress on the floor. She offered me a glass of water, and then told me she spent most of her time thinking about killing herself. But then the only people who would remember her brother would be her parents, and that wasn't fair. I made her promise not to do anything until I finished work. On my drive back, I remember thinking, to my shame, that the story was too insane. She worked in customer service and had a bright and cheerful demeanor when dealing with customers. I was getting set up to be scammed. Why dump all that on your boss? Also, much to my shame, I told someone else. When I got in and started my prep, I told the night manager about one of her new staff members and my concerns. She looked it up for me, investigated. Her parents had made the papers. There was an obituary for her brother. We were both pretty tough people, but it broke both of us. Night manager cried too. The night manager wasn't scheduled the next couple of days and she already had a key to my place. I sent her there to take apart a futon in my guest bedroom that I already had slated to replace with a proper bed. It was old but had served me well as a bed in my college days. The night manager and her boyfriend packed it in her car along with some random things like nightstands and an old coffee maker. Then she dropped off her boyfriend and went over to the other gal's house. Knocked on the door, said that she was there to drop off the futon that the other gal had bought for me. Sleepy though she was, she saw through the bullcrap and said, "He told you." The night manager pretty unashamedly admitted to it, but said it was a good thing I did and that she was there to help. They put the bed together, and the night manager spent most of the morning cleaning the place and putting things together while talking. I had given her some cash, and her boyfriend threw in too. Made it feel a lot more like a home. They did a couple of Walmart and Goodwill runs and some dumpster dives and finished furnishing her place. At that point, the night manager had been awake for around 38 hours, so her and the other girl slept on the futon together. I was going to meet up with them after, but they needed sleep. Instead, we met up the next night. After that, she usually hung out with whoever wasn't working, but she was putting in a ton of hours herself. We tried to help her develop and grow a friend network. I wish I could say the story has a happy ending. Maybe if we were better people. Maybe if I was sober or cared more back then. Instead, neither me nor the night manager were sober a minute longer than absolutely necessary, and drugs were always on the menu. We cycled through partners very regularly. That first boyfriend the night manager had? He lasted about 2 weeks after that. We never encouraged her drinking or drug use, nor offered her up drugs, but it wasn't like we were sober much when around her. I left for a better job and didn't keep in close contact. That girl? I found out through the night manager that a while after I left, she started drinking and drugs not long after. She then tried her hand at stripping to pay for the drugs, and killed herself not long after. Every now and again, when I have a good day, I remember all of that, most of the conversations I had with her. I remember how incredibly cheery and genuine she seemed when talking to people despite the stuff she carried, and I cry. The world should have done better by her. I should have done better by her. Well, F, you did everything you could, and more than 99% of others would. That's enough internet for me today, F. Reply 4. Please never forget you gave her peace for a while. Suicide is basically terminal mental illness, in her case trauma, caused by horrible people. You showered her respect and dignity and helped her feel safe in her space. That is everything. Thank you for showing up. Story 6. My grandmother was born in 1918 in Germany. She survived heavy bombings in WW2. Our family never talked much about the bad things. If they talked about the war, it was mostly light-hearted anecdotes. I was around 9 when we were watching a documentary with my parents and grandma. It was about the bombings, and when the term firestorm came up, we kids were curious. My parents started explaining how a big fire can draw so much air that it creates a strong wind that pushes the flames even further. My grandma suddenly got that 1,000-yard stare and casually said, "I have seen people burn like torches." We said, "What?" And Grandma snapped out of it and said, "What?" I guess it had to come out, but she didn't even realize saying it. Reply 1. I worked as an editorial assistant, most junior job, on a magazine which had a very old readership. We joked that if the subscriptions went down, it was because the subscriber had died of old age. The magazine was UK-based and the readership was mostly American. We had an active readers' letters page where people would write in reminiscences. It was the 90s, so everything was via letters, and I was in charge of it because nobody else wanted to do it. I found it fascinating. We tended to only put in upbeat reminiscences on the page, but people would write in about everything. We frequently got people asking us if we could help find a missing person, which always made me feel sad, as there was no way a 24-year-old sitting in London could help find, say, their daughter who disappeared in Dublin 30 years ago. But the war reminiscences, oh my god, they were unbelievably graphic. I won't bother writing about the run-of-the-mill war crimes. but the one I'm going to recount will stick in your brain, so I suggest you don't keep reading if you have a vivid imagination. A person who immigrated to the U.S. after the war wrote about his experiences as a night warden in London during the bombing. He said that the one he could never forget was when a large group of factory workers, possibly 30 or more, sheltered in the basement of a factory during an air raid. It should have been safe, except that the job they were doing required large amounts of boiling water, and the factory suffered a direct hit. One of the main pipes was hit, and by the time they managed to move the rubble, everyone was boiled/steamed alive. They would try and pull the bodies out, and the flesh would just come off the bone in their hands. Like cooked chicken. I have never wanted to unread a letter more. Reply 2. Good God, am I happy that my mom's ex's Belgian stepdad had war stories like me and my friends would steal the eel traps that the German soldiers had set up and bring all the eels home for dinner. Reply 3. I've read accounts of the Allied bombing of Dresden in Germany in 1945 that are horrifying. One of the reasons the death toll was so high is that on the night of the bombing, several large trains arrived, full of civilians fleeing advancing Soviet forces, with most of them farmers who had never heard an air raid siren. After the bombing and firestorm, they found a large public air raid shelter containing only ashes, shin deep. Because of the firestorm, temperatures within shelter reached at least 2,200 degrees. They know this because a number of the refugees were carrying their cast iron cookware, which had melted. Reply 4. My grandpa was born in 1936, so very young during WF2, and lived near what's today Gdansk in Poland. He once casually dropped how, in the days after the Gustloff, a famous ship supposed to bring German refugees west, sank in the Baltic Sea, he and his friends saw the frozen bodies of the drowned washed ashore, and how they were looting the corpses for coins and other treasures. It was right by the place where his father had taught him to swim, so he went on to talk about that instead. Reply 5. It's possible he looted some of my grandmother's relatives. She had 7 or 10 people from her family go down with the Gustloff. Story 7. Got a new coworker. Within the first hour working with this person, he told me he got fired from a job for telling another female coworker a story. The story is, he was fired from a different job for watching porn and jerking off in his office. Brother, this story has already gotten you fired. Twice, stop telling it. Reply 1. Every time he tells it, it adds to the story, so he's really just crafting the ultimate story one step at a time. Reply 2. What if didn't actually get fired from the first job for jerking it in the office, but has such a humiliation kink that he only says he did to anyone who would listen? Story 8. You just reminded me, my partner and I were talking to my grandma and it was a very normal conversation. Somehow the topic of guns came up and she shook her head. Oh no, I've hated guns since I came across my friend raped and murdered in her garage. She was shot with her own gun. We just sat there in silence like, what can you say? She then very quickly changed topic to talk about her puzzle. Reply 1. I told my granddad that I wanted to bring my Japanese girlfriend to come see him, and he told me he didn't want to see her. Without thinking, I asked how come, and he told me a really graphic story about being a POW in a Japanese internment camp, and seeing one of his friends getting picked out at random and beaten to death by guards for fun/stress relief. He says he struggles to look at Asian faces since without being filled with rage, and he's worried he would end up saying something he regrets. He'd never said anything to me about his war experiences before, and I had no idea how to respond to that. So I just gave him a hug, changed the topic, and later told the girlfriend that it wasn't a good idea. Damn, though. Reply 2. Respect to him for understanding it's not right, and he shouldn't take it out on someone who couldn't have had anything to do with it. War F's up a lot of people. Reply 3. I had a neighbor as a kid who had to hide from her husband. The fact that their grandson was going to be going to Japan as an exchange student for the same reason. She told me he would never forgive the boy if he knew. Reply 4. My grandfather served in the Pacific Theater, and we couldn't even think about buying stuff from Japan. He would never consider a Japanese car or the like. It occurs to me now that me must have finally relented when we brought a Nintendo over. I can't imagine he didn't realize where those are from. He never really talked about the war, but I have the sword he took from a Japanese NCO that tried to kill him, so I know he saw some bad times. Story 9. When I was in prison, they had to clean out a cell after a man had been stabbed to death by his cell. I was in the cell next to that when the guard pulled him out and another were laughing about how the deceased man cried and couldn't even speak English, and that they waited to pop the doors until the attacker stopped. I still hear that crap when I try to sleep. Reply 1. That's disgusting. I hope you found some peace. I don't know where or how with that, but man, I hope you found it. Reply 2. I've known a lot of ex-prison and jail guards and cops. This story doesn't surprise me at all. I've come to believe that line of work attracts amoral people who crave power. Much like it's been proven that there's a higher percentage of CEOs that are sociopaths than the regular population. And no, I don't think it's all of them. There are a lot of good ones that do go into it to help people. But it's hard for them to fight the system. Reply 3. My wife joined the prison service in my country 5 years ago. She loves it. She has never been able to admit she was at fault or wrong, so this job suits her perfectly. It doesn't matter what happens, she is right. She is wearing the uniform and therefore she is in the right. Just letting the months go by until both kids are 18 and away at college. Then I'm out. Can't live with that anymore. Reply 4. I was going to stay until my last one graduated. She was a freshman this year and I walked. Best thing I ever did. The kids know. Divorce her now. Reply 5. This reminded me of my brief time working in prison. A prisoner was telling the story of his crime. He was at a party and stabbed another person, but the way he told it like he was telling a joke, mockingly mimicking the victim in a funny voice, "Help he stabbed me, he stabbed me." I realized that for many people they learn from an early age that their life is worthless. If their life is so cheap, anyone else's is a lot less. Story 10. Playing a board game with a friend who had become a drug dealer. Told me that there was a night where someone had ripped him off and he and his friends went after him, leading to a car chase. The other car hit a bystander and left the victim paraplegic. He felt really guilty about it, would obsessively watch news reports of the incident over and over again. I found out he had died of alcohol poisoning about a year later. Reply 1. One thing I have learned from watching all 406 episodes of Forensic Files is that killers are usually obsessed with news reports about their crimes, and they often use this as a starting point to catch the perp. Reply 2. How to solve a crime. Step 1. Make a documentary about a recent, unsolved crime. Step 2. Put it on Netflix. Step 3. Check which user has watched it more than 100 times and notify the police. Story 11. I was talking to a very good friend of my now deceased father. He said that many years ago he talked my father out of murdering my mom. He believed she was cheating on him, even stalked her on the way to college with a gun in the car. She wasn't cheating, also they already had kids at the time. I'm 100% sure what he told me is true. Got chills thinking what my life would have been had this occurred. My mom is the greatest person I know by a mile. I'm glad she's still here. Reply 1. My dad confessed to me once about driving to his ex-wife's house with a gun after the divorce. They both were cheating, and she got my half-sister. Said he was planning a double murder. Suicide. Said he sat outside of her house for hours before he turned around. Reply 2. Damn, sorry to hear that. Really makes us think on the what-ifs. I hope you were at least old enough to hear something that messed up. Believe I was 12 at the time. It was directly after he and my mom got divorced, on one of our visitations, which I'm only now realizing the implications of. Yeesh. Reply 3. My dad confessed to me that he was seriously contemplating suicide one night, but was saved by my aunt, his SIL, calling to ask him to take her to rehab for IV heroin use. Thankful dad is still here, but my aunt ended up dying from pancreatic cancer. likely due to hepatitis C she contracted from IV use. Story 12. Was at a club one time with a group of work friends. One dude grew up super religious and it was his first time really drinking. He tearfully confessed he was gay and probably forgot the next day. I still follow his socials and he's still deep in the closet. Reply 1. I worked with a guy who came out to everyone on a Friday afternoon and then took it back the following Monday because his parents told him he wasn't over the weekend. Reply 2. Mom, Dad, I have something I need to tell you. I'm attracted to men. No. Okay, I guess I'm not. Reply 3. Oh, that reminds me of a guy I dated who offhandedly told me in bed while very drunk that he fantasized about sucking a guy's cock. We ultimately broke up because he never wanted to have sex with me. Could those things be connected? Story 13. A woman from South Africa I met in college, and I were talking after a psych class about trauma. We were discussing how physically safe she felt in that college town and casually dropped she'd been kidnapped and raped by a couple gang members back home. I was visibly shocked, but when I gently asked for more info, she acted like it was just something that happened. Mentioned virtually no woman she knew growing up had experienced sexual violence in South Africa. She was the first I'd met who casually discussed sexual coercion. Super validating, since I'd experienced the same and hadn't told anyone at that point. Reply 1. I live in the US but worked with a SA guy who lived in Australia. He overstayed his visa time, I think. Whatever it is when you immigrate to Australia and was there illegally, he couldn't travel out of the country because he couldn't get back in. My company knew and turned a blind eye. He said in SA, 1 in every 3 women get raped, and he had 2 daughters and a wife, and he looked me dead in the eyes and said, if we stayed there, which one do I pick to be raped? Obviously, he wouldn't be handing his family members over to anyone. He meant it in the context of he'd rather live illegally and risk it than stay in SA where something bad would certainly happen, and his daughters wouldn't have a future. Reply 2. I can relate to how you felt. A hilarious, lively coworker at the housing authority became a good friend of mine. One day we were trading funny stories about a talent show the kids in our projects had organized. She asked me if I wanted kids someday, and I told her I wasn't sure, then returned the question. She casually replied that she would love to, but as a child in Phnom Penh, Khmer Rouge soldiers raped her so violently and gave her so many STDs she was unable to have children. Then she asked me to pass the pepper. Reply 3. Surviving the Khmer Rouge does a number on you. As a very young kid, my family, fresh from Cambodia, rented Faces of Death and made me watch. They were laughing at it. Same way my work colleague from Mexico just softly and casually mentioned her school friends getting killed at their quinceañeras over drug gang violence. Reply 4. My best friend in my last few years of high school in New Zealand had moved there from South Africa. She slept with a night light because she was terrified of the dark. I remember her telling me a vivid story about being out for a walk with her mom, and they came to a bridge. When they reached the middle of the bridge, a group of young men crossed into view on the other side. My friend and her mom stopped and looked back and saw another group of men behind them. The 2 groups started converging on them. My friend and her mom ended up jumping off the bridge to escape. Story 14. My grandmother married a man almost 20 years younger than herself, shortly after my sister and I were born. When we were about 2 years old, our mother went into a psychiatric facility, and we were placed in my grandmother's care. About 4 or 5 months after this, my sister got what my grandmother thought was a UTI, and upon examination, it was discovered that she had gonorrhea. Long story short, there's an investigation and my grandmother's husband is arrested. Nearly 2 decades pass, and although my grandmother has divorced this man, she has remained friends with his 2 sisters, the youngest, who is about 15 years her brother's junior. We are having a 4th of July celebration, and the sisters are in attendance. They are telling my grandmother that her ex has been released from prison and is being housed in a facility for SA offenders. That's when the oldest sister drops the bombshell. It didn't stop him last time, and it won't stop him this time. We all just look at her in shock. What do you mean last time? Apparently shortly before marrying my grandmother, he had been released from a mental institution after being hospitalized for diddling his youngest sister. The entire family knew he was a pedo and just kept it to themselves, because he had committed his first act when he was still technically a minor, 17, and they had hoped the hospitalization had cured him. Then, after he reoffended, they literally just didn't mention any of this for damn near 2 decades while simultaneously remaining close friends with my family, which was absolutely devastated by the act. Needless to say, we all cut contact with them. Story 15. Met a guy, first date. 10 minutes into it, he tells me that he recently killed a cat with his bare hands, but can't remember most of it. Story 16. My dad once told me about driving my mom's favorite joke not a joke she used to share about me. She always wanted a daughter, but because she almost died when she was pregnant with my brother, my dad apparently refused to be with her, scared it was going to happen again. So she got him blackout drunk one night and got him to bed and conceived me. Always told that story with so much pride until I got old enough to understand sex and consent, and I asked her point blank why she was proud of raping Dad in order to get pregnant with me. Story 17. I was talking to a guy a year after we got out of high school. His father was an LA Metro cop. He told me casually that he and his buddy would put on suits, take his dad's Crown Victoria badge and gun, and hassle prostitutes in Hollywood. He said hassle, but I think he meant get free services. When I saw him at the 10-year reunion, the only one I attended, he had become an LA Metro cop, but was getting a divorce, was on his 3rd police force, and was being sued by 3 people. He said they were suing the Depps, but were also suing him personally, and he didn't think he would be a cop for much longer. I didn't ask for details. He told me all this in 30 seconds. Then he said, "So, what have you been up to?" Edit. This guy also held our high school record for bench press. 460? He would snort all kinds of cocaine and do a single rep for the record. FDNUUAS. 2. I talked to a friend who said this guy was impersonating cops since the 11th grade. They would also pistol whip pimps and drug dealers and steal drugs. Story 18. When the first Harry Potter movie was released in 2001, my ex-boyfriend at the time told me, while we were sitting in the theater, that he had a crush on Hermione, Emma Watson, in the movie. She was 10. He was 25 at the time. I was pretty stunned at his casual comment about being attracted to a child. Anyways, a few years later, it came out that he had sexually abused a young girl from the family who took him in when his mom kicked him out. He was 16. She was under 10, I think. So yeah, glaring red flags. Story 19. A friend who was a recovering crack addict, years after she was able to quit, once mentioned that at a party she sold her friend to a couple of guys to do what they wanted with her, for some amount of crack. Her friend was too out of it to give consent or not. The way it was relayed was so casual, laughingly, and with no regret. I know people do mess up things when they're addicted, and I can get that, but the lack of guilt or remorse got to me. I could never see her the same way after that. Edited for grammar. Reply 1. Bruh. I was a serious IV drug user for years, did a lot of effed up crap. Never in a million years could I have done that. That chick is a effing sociopath. Reply 2. I watched one of those soft white underbelly videos on YouTube where the meth-addicted interviewee said she was asleep when a psychotic meth addict acquaintance was so out of it that he stuck the flame-heated needle of his syringe into her eye, thinking he could draw meth from it. She said she would seek treatment in a few days if it didn't get better. She admitted to already being blind in the eye, but thought it could heal. Looking at it, you could tell it was only a matter of days or hours till it turned black and rotted. Reply 3. I had a friend do something similar to me. She'd organized to get paid by a couple of bickies, plied me with drugs and alcohol. I was still with it enough to say, no, yeah, you can guess the rest. I never saw her again. One thing that really pissed me off, stop reading now if it could trigger you, because it ain't nice. Apparently there was blood all over the room. I kind of stayed friends with her brother, and we got to talking about why I wasn't friends with his sister anymore. She told him the blood was from her dog and heat. Like, couldn't she just say she had a nosebleed or something? I don't know. That made it worse somehow. Reply 4. People do crazy, crazy crap for drugs. A friend's sister became alcoholic and really into drugs and agreed to live as a slave to her dealer and his wife on their utility room floor in exchange for free drink and drugs. When she finally left, she was dangerously malnourished, covered in cigarette burns, and had been sexually abused by them both almost daily to the point of lasting physical damage. Story 20. My mom picked me up so we could get food on my birthday a few years ago, and randomly brought up an instance when me and her went to Disney for a cheerleading competition I was in, where the only thing I asked for on the whole trip aside from food was this round Minnie Mouse plushie filled with those soft styrofoam-like beads. It was so squishy and soft, so I took it to my mom and asked if I could have it. She had said no, so I just assumed parents saying no because they don't want me to have it. She casually dropped why I wound up getting it on the last day of the trip. My bio dad and her were still married at the time, and he drained their joint bank account on strippers at a local strip club. Her friend who was with us, whose daughter was also on the team, had to cover dinner for us that night, and I didn't know. She had to call the next morning and ask her job to give her a 3-day advance on her paycheck, as we weren't leaving until Saturday morning. So that was gonna be like 3-1/2 days without food for the day, as our stay package only included breakfast at the resort. I already hated my bio dad by this point, and I just couldn't believe he would be so effing reckless. I believed he would do it, but not that he would put me and my mom without food for 3+ days. The jackass! I still have that plushie, by the way. It's in my closet, my bio dad, though.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.